Good afternoon or good morning, whatever it is you're watching this video. My name is Dabdoub. I'm a retired captain from New Orleans Police Department. I was asked by the Fraternal Order of Police to once again give classes in the promotional exam process, testing process. What we're going to do today is an attempt to make it a little bit easier for those of you who work in different shifts and having trouble getting to all the classes, to give this opening class about what this program is by video. So we're trying this out, and certainly please give Donovan your feedback on whether or not this works out well, and if it does, maybe we'll get a chance to do some more and make it a little bit easier for you as you go forward. So what we're going to talk about today is a method. It is one of potentially a couple of different methods that are out there that you can hear about. There are formalized classes you can go and pay for. There's businesses that do it. There's other people that took this here in New Orleans Police Department. They had methods that are a little different from what this is and were extremely successful as well. But what I can tell you, this method, which I developed many years ago, not only worked well for myself, but I was fortunate enough to be able to help countless people prepare for the promotional exam successfully using this method. Again, I want to stress that this is not the only method. It's just a method that was developed. So we're going to talk today in general terms about how you should prepare to approach taking this test. Specifically, the method we're going to discuss today, I've said before and I'll say it again, in some ways is the answer to the test. And by that, no matter what scenario they could throw at you, no matter what in-basket challenge they may throw your way, if you train yourself to use this style of thinking, you're going to set yourself up to always be prepared to hit the most points that you're prepared to do. Meaning, if you follow a set pattern, you're not going to be nervous come test time. You're going to understand the principles that the assessors are going to be looking to score you on, the principles that civil service has set in place that you're tested, to get your KSAs evaluated. What is your true knowledge, skills, and abilities, and your ability to become a supervisor one day? And ultimately, the purpose of this is for the superintendent to be able to identify those of you who are at a point in your career where you're best prepared to take on that next level of responsibility. Just because you don't pass the promotional exam doesn't mean you'll never get there or you're not a good police officer. It has little to do with your intelligence level. It's about where you've prepared yourself from experience, from studying, from preparation to go to that next level. So what we want to do, what we're going to be doing here today is taking that next step in an effort to help you get ready to be in that next step. One other piece I want to stress, as we go through this process or we use this method, I will tell you that not only is it going to be effective for you in the testing process, but it will actually help you be a good supervisor. It's not like you're born a bird and they throw you out the nest and one day you're in an egg, the next day you're a bird and you can fly around. You have to learn how to do those things. You have to learn how to become a supervisor. Today, your responsibilities as an officer are one thing, or if we use this same video in the future and you're a sergeant, you're going to take the lieutenant's test. If you're a sergeant, you're just not, because you pass a test, automatically may not have all the skills you need to be as effective as you can. So the good part about what we're going to go over today and what we're going to prepare in person at the FOP training sessions, where we'll spend time together going over specific scenarios and showing you how to apply the method, is that you can also use this, and I did, and I know many others do, actually use this in your day-to-day life as a supervisor. When you're confronted with an issue, as you most certainly will be, you need to know a way, you need to have something on your toolkit to be able to respond effectively under pressure, right? Under pressure, we know that we're going to respond how we train. This is an opportunity. Win, lose, or draw on the promotional exam, this is a good way for you to continue to learn how to be able to react and respond to situations or problems you may encounter on the street and while at work. So, with that being said, let's dive into it and we're going to talk about it. With this video, you're going to receive a copy of a simple Word document that is going to line out all these things I'm talking about. I would strongly recommend that you print that out and use that as we go along in practice. When we see you in person at the FOP training sessions, please bring your printed copy with you, because we're going to work directly from it. When we go over scenarios, we're going to be looking for you to respond in this format. It's a way for you to think, and these cover the vast majority, if not all, possible thought processes, answers, however you want to put it, that they're going to be looking for from a testing perspective for you to be able to be able to score the most points for the assessors to give you credit for. So, that being said, let's dive right in. And again, you're going to get a copy of this. So I'm going to read from it. I'll show you briefly what it looks like for the camera perspective. Don't stress that you don't have it as we're going over it. We're going to explain it. If you print this form out when you get the video, before you get the video, or stop the video where you're at, print the form out and follow along from that process. This will make a lot more sense to you. It's really something that's just a couple of words, right? And quite honestly, it's something that would fit on a half a page, but I just have it bigger to be able for you to write notes and have some thoughts for yourself to put in. So what we developed is a set methodology for you to go through. The first thing you're going to do when you walk into the testing center to take this test is to sit down and write these keywords down in a list. So before the video camera starts, before the in-basket starts, if you get nervous, if you get stressed out, if you get tongue-tied on what you should say, you should be able to glance down at a piece of paper that you wrote down what we're getting ready to talk about, these simple words that should cue your memory to get you on a thought process to start talking about things that are going to matter, that are going to score you points. We're going to talk a lot about scenarios when we do the in-person meetings, when we do have the in-person classes here in the very near future, about being realistic. Years ago, when we started taking the test, you heard different officers thinking they were going to do really good because when they gave answers to a scenario, they said things that they thought assessors would think would sound good. If there was a pursuit scenario, they would say on the video that they'd call it the NOPD helicopter. Well, as you all know, we don't have an NOPD helicopter, and assessors would ask civil service and the moderators from the police department, do you guys have a helicopter? Because most people didn't say helicopter. These one or two people said it, and they'd say, no, we don't have a helicopter. You would not only get not credit for it, you were likely taken away from things like that. So when we go to this, I want you to think of it, and you should always think of it, in giving realistic answers. Don't give fantasy island answers. If we don't actually have that in the police department today, if we don't have that process that we use, if it's not within the consent decree guidelines, if it's outside the boundaries of departmental rules and regulations and policies and practical standards, don't say it. Don't use it. Use this process to help you think through the realistic answers you should be given. So I'm going to read off what these are real quickly, and then I'm going to take just a minute or two on each topic and explain it. This will be a relatively short video, probably, and I'm guessing, start to finish, no more than a half hour. But it's something you should probably watch at least twice, at least from this point forward, where we're at here, to get a good grasp of it. It'll help you be prepared for the classes. So these words that you're going to write down that are going to guide you are this. The first thing is always the problem, right? What is the problem that you're facing? Every problem has an underlying cause, right? What's the underlying cause to the issue that you were confronted with? Then there's a big subsection about your decision making. That's where a lot of your points are at. We're going to talk about what decision making till we're blue in the face. And it talks about what needs to be done. And there's several subcategories under that. There's planning, organizing, showing your leadership, showing initiative, and talking about the resources that you know are available to help you be able to accomplish or overcome a certain circumstance. Then we're going to go and talk a little bit about follow-up. You should never assume that a problem you're confronted with is finished once you say something about it. In the scenario world and in the real world. Just because you talk about it once never means that it's resolved. Usually doesn't mean that it's resolved that easily. Talk about monitoring. So if you got to follow up, if you have an issue, you're going to have to monitor the progress of an issue, specifically, especially with personnel issues and an unfolding and active criminal on-scene investigation type scenario in real life. And then the related items. This usually pertains more to the in-basket, and we'll spend a minute talking about that when we get to it. It's important for you at some point to demonstrate potentially that if the scenarios are tied together, or if there's items in your in-basket that are related to each other. If you're in-basket, you have an AWP schedule, and a couple of pages down, you have a furlough request. It would be important for you to note that, hey, I acknowledge that I need to use my AWP schedule to decide whether or not I approve this furlough request. And you know, we're going to talk in person. I'm just going to give you one small quick example, but that should also make you start thinking about resources. When you find certain things in your in-basket, you're confronted, it's always smart that if you demonstrate you have the ability to tie, if you were going through an in-basket, I have my AWP schedule, I have a furlough request, I'm going to use this to go against it, but one of the things before I decide that I was not going to give it to the officer, grant the furlough, I'm going to look at other resources to see if I can do that. Is there an ability to, is there any overtime? Can the reserve officer come fill a district slot for us that day to allow for somebody to be off? Whatever it may be. But we're going to tie all that together when it comes into person. So what we're going to do today is not going to make a complete picture to you until you get to see it applied to scenarios. So we'll be doing that here a bit in the very near future. Okay, so let's get started. In order to make this easy to explain or try to apply what these principles are as we go through them, just spend a minute or two on each. I'm going to give you a scenario. It's a generic scenario, but we're going to use it to be able to refer to give examples of what we're talking about. So today's scenario is you're on your day watch supervisor. You are responding to an officer said he needs assistance on a traffic accident with injury, that one of the people involved in the accident is being combative and he needs assistance. As you pull up to the scene, the video shows you this. You see there's a female standing in the background like she was involved in the accident, but out of her car, and she's crying. And you see a guy being slammed onto the hood of the car, and he's saying, I don't know why you're doing this. Why are you doing this? I'm fine, I'm fine. I'm just worried about my wife. Why are you doing this? I'm fine. Slams the guy in the hood of the car, handcuffs him, and then throws him to the ground and says, oh, thanks for getting here. This guy has been a handful. And the video stops. So we're going to use that as the issue that you're confronting for this particular video. So as you heard me talk about a little while ago, the very first thing on the top of our list, and you should have it hopefully printed out in front of you, is the problem. As simple as it may seem, not only will you get points for pointing out that you have the aptitude to recognize what the issue is, right? I mean, quite honestly, there's a wrong answer in here, that the problem is you got to go see the officer to get him to handle this accident as quickly as possible and get the lockup as quickly as possible because you want the backlog to build up. That's not the right answer. A problem statement would be, I got called to the scene where I saw an officer using force that, in my opinion, may not have been justified. I'm not saying it wasn't, but may not have been justified. And then I certainly saw him do something that was unjustified by throwing a handcuffed prisoner to the ground, and I saw his wife crying in the background. So the problem would be, I have a potential, here, let me stop for a second. So when you start at the video, every time, if you're going to use this method, every time it starts, no matter what you're confronted with, you're going to want to go down this method. You're going to want to start off. As soon as the camera stops and says, okay, you start answering, you should say, my problem here is I pulled up on a scene where I observed an officer potentially use unauthorized force to handcuff a prisoner, and I certainly saw him use inappropriate force when he threw a handcuffed prisoner to the street. So I have an issue here of something where an officer is certainly acting inappropriately. So here's what we're going to do, right? So you understand the picture? You frame up what it is. You're telling the assessor that you understand what the issue is, that you have the aptitude to identify what the real issues were, that you're not in la-la land and thinking about some off-the-wall things that is an issue or problem you're going to confront, that you can really see what your problem is that you have to deal with as a supervisor. Second piece, cause. More times than not, it's going to be easier for you to identify the cause on a personnel matter issue. Somebody's constantly coming into work late. You get a note from his spouse, his or her spouse, they have a drinking problem at home, whatever it may be, right? So in those circumstances, the underlying cause to the person always coming up late to roll call is that they've got, you know, a drinking problem and marital problems, and they're sleeping in late, and they just not responsible for what they're supposed to be doing. That's a little bit easier to identify, but you always have an underlying cause. So you would say in this next thing, my problem, as we stated, the underlying causes to this issue are yet to be discovered, but we certainly have a potential of poor training of the officer. He was not able to handle himself appropriately. He didn't understand the rules and regulations of what was supposed to be. Potentially he was overwhelmed by what he was confronted with. He has inappropriate skills to be able to deal with people. I don't know what it is quite yet, but there's something that's bigger. There's the issue itself, but there's something that led up to that. And when we get through this scenario, we're going to understand what that is. It isn't my job just to go and write a DI-1 to initiate an investigation. I got to figure out what got us to the point where that officer took the actions I observed the witness in taking. And then the next piece is your decision making. I always said, so with what I'm facing, here's my decisions I'm going to do. This is what I would do. And we have that broken up into 5 separate categories. Your planning, your organization, leadership, initiative, and the resources that you have available to you. So let's talk about them one at a time. Planning. It's simply what you're going to do and why you're going to do it, right? So in this circumstance, after you stated the first 2, so you say, so my plan is this. I'm going to immediately go up to the prisoner. I'm going to immediately go out of my vehicle. I'm going to instruct the officer to stand down and to calm down, go over to the prisoner that was knocked on the ground, check for injuries. I see the young lady in the background was crying. Was she the one that was injured in the accident? Check around to make sure that EMS is on the way. First thing I got to do is, once I have the officer calm down, I got to make sure that this officer was using common sense, call an EMS for those who may have been injured. This was an accident with injury. And it was the prisoner injured from what he did? Was a young lady crying because of an injury? So once I got the normal on-scene issues taken care of, I'm gonna go ask that officer very briefly. I'm gonna pull him to the side once I feel everyone's injuries are under the side, and I'm gonna very quickly tell him that what I observed was inappropriate, and I would expect that he will not act like that anymore. And we're gonna discuss, and I will quickly ask him what was the reason for him doing what I observed him doing. Depending on what he answers, I will make some decisions. If he gives me something that's somewhat reasonable, gosh, the thing stopped. Maybe the guy had a gun tucked in the back of his waistband that I didn't see, and he threw him down because the guy was getting ready to try to grab the gun even with his hands behind his back. I didn't see that. Or it may just be, man, the guy spit on me a minute before you pulled up, and he just pissed me off, right? You don't know what the answer is going to be. But based on what response I would get, I would make sure that this is what I'm going to do. Look, we're going to get deep into what those answers are going to be. But you want to clearly state, what is your plan, what you're going to do, how you're going to go about it. And that's the next piece, organization. How are you going to organize what you're doing? This is how I'm going to implement what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to call EMS. I'm going to call for another officer to come handle the scene. I'm going to call another supervisor to assist me to come see what's going on. I'm going to, notify dispatch. Eventually, I'm going to ask PIB to come to the scene. Whatever it is that you need to do to get yourself set up to handle that scene, that's what you're going to do to organize. You should hopefully, by this point, start to get a hint of what this format is going to do. It's going to force you to think about those things you should be doing in any scenario. whether it's a tactical scenario on the street that you're faced with, similar to what we used here, whether it's a personnel issue with a problem officer, a behavioral issue, whether it's an administrative challenge that's been given to you by a superior to overcome, whatever that is that you're confronted with in those scenarios, this forces you to give an answer in an organized fashion that if you use, that you memorize, that if you use, will most certainly give you the opportunity to get the most points, because you're going to think about those things you should be saying. So once you go through organization, it's going to talk about leadership. How can I resolve the big problem? We talked a little bit about it in the beginning. In this particular scenario, we're talking about you would go into, in this circumstance, not just because I noticed this officer doing, I'm going to look into, was it a specific issue with this officer? Did he do what he did based on training he received that maybe needs to be refined? Is it because he's overworked? Does he have personal issues in the background that I'm not aware of that led up to this? Was there something else that I was unaware of? Is there a training issue on how he could have interacted or maybe prevented this situation and getting to where it was from the first place? I'm going to review his video, and whatever I learn, I'm going to take back and I'm going to train the rest of the troops with, right? I'm going to go and do X, Y, and Z. And we're going to talk a whole lot about leadership examples. In the in-person classes, we're going to give you multiple examples of each one of these things we're talking about, that whatever scenario you face with, you should already have it in your mind to be able to pull those out. The things we're going to talk about based on these principles, we're going to give you answers that you will likely be able to regurgitate in the actual test itself. You're not going to have to worry about trying to think of every unique thing you should have to say. You should have to be able to understand how to apply these principles to it. Next one is initiative. I'm going to do something about it. Okay, we sort of did that up front. So for this scenario, that initiative, you don't want to double beat it, but for initiative, it's you showing that you're going to do more than just, I'm calling PIB and I'm going to have a DI-1 investigation started, and I'm going to have somebody else do this report, and I'm going to call the captain and tell them that Officer so-and-so did something really bad. Initiative means, what am I going to do that's really an opportunity to be unique, to separate myself from the crowd, that I'm not just going to go through the routine, I'm not just going to punch numbers and go down the street to do what that is. Let me stop and give you a really short story. A lot of times, people will say, when they're talking in general conversation, they may say about police, oh, that guy, he gets $20 an hour to ride around in that police car, or that lady gets $40 an hour to go take depositions, or that guy gets X amount of dollars an hour to go operate that crane. And in reality, that's not what they're getting paid for. They're getting paid for the value they created for themselves. For all of you as police officers, as they say, if somebody would point to you in the street and say, see that guy, I want to do that. He gets $20 an hour to ride around in a police car all day. That's a good job to have. We all know that you're not getting $20 an hour to ride around in a police car and have lights and sirens to get through red lights, right? But the issue, and this goes directly where we're going, you're getting paid that $20 an hour because you created value for yourself. You lived a clean life. You got a good education. You were able to read and write the English language. You didn't use drugs. You didn't violate crimes. You were able to complete an extremely strenuous training academy for both mental and physical challenges that you were wrought with. You had to go through an FTO program which was challenging. You have to have the intestinal fortitude and courage to go out and do what we do every day, right? All of those things add up to why the city of New Orleans pays you your $20 an hour to be in that police car. You don't get it just because. The point of that is not just anybody can fill that seat. Same thing applies when it comes to becoming a supervisor, when it comes to being a sergeant, lieutenant, commander. You have to prove, you have to set yourself up. That's what this test is about, that you've created the value for yourself to be able to go to that next level. The value, why they pick you over somebody else, or you get a passing score over someone else, is because you're doing those things different. You're doing those things more than what the ordinary person would do. 99.9% of police officers would know, based on the scenario we talked about, you're going to tell them to stop, don't do it, call PIB, and ask for medical assistance. Everybody's going to do that. Where you start to separate yourself is when you demonstrate that you recognize that it's a lot bigger than that you own this police department. There's no secret men in black that are going to come behind you and do what has to be done with correcting behavioral problems, making sure perceptions with the community are handled, making sure law is followed, and overseeing a lot of really powerful individuals with badges and guns to make sure they do the right thing. You have to demonstrate that you understand that that's a much bigger deal. And in your leadership, and then secondly, the initiatives, is an outstanding opportunity to show that you think differently than everyone else, that you see the bigger picture. So again, when we meet in person, we're going to deep dive those two specific issues in great detail, because there's a lot of opportunity inside of there for you to demonstrate and to score points across the board with that. You're not going to want to spend too much time on any one particular one of these areas. You're going to want to be able to hit them all, and it comes into practice and your flow. We're going to talk through all of those things, but I wanted to stop and take a minute to show you that. Next piece is resources. What outside resources can you employ? Let's use that different scenario for a second. Let's say it's the in-basket scenario. And you want to say, or let's use the same one, I apologize. Let's go back to this. If you say, what resources can I employ in this? You're going to want to start talking about, I'm immediately going to call for additional resources. You want to say these words. I'm going to ask for another supervisor to meet me on the scene to assist me with not only the traffic investigation itself, but the internal investigation and coordinating public integrity division. I'm going to ask for another officer to come and assist and watch traffic while we investigate the scene itself. I'm going to ask for PIB to be called out, potentially the FIT team may have to be notified. I'm going to have to notify my supervisor to let them know that what's going on and what is occurring. After this is all said and done, I'm going to be working with the academy, talking to the academy about what they saw this officer's errors were, and what training improvements can we apply across the board so this doesn't happen again. Is there a need? Is the stress level high for this? If the stress level is high enough for this officer to do it, is it the same for other officers on the platoon? Or other officers in the department? Is there a need for me to get other mental health professionals to come on board and start riding, do what the chaplains doing, ride along in the cars? What happened is not just one isolated incident, ladies and gentlemen. What happened was because of a series of issues, and it's my responsibility to dig to the bottom of it and to use everything at my disposal to make sure it doesn't happen again. You want to show that you know that you're not Superman or Superwoman, that you understand there's other things at your disposal, not helicopters, don't call in the NOPD helicopter, but real resources that are out there. You should know what those things are. Be prepared to respond and talk about what those resources are and how you can apply them. You start doing these things, you're starting to separate yourself from the rest of the crowd. You're starting to separate yourself where the assessor is going to start giving you points for saying, this officer is thinking the right way. They understand what it means to be a supervisor. You're not just a police officer who's getting a little bit more pay and ride around with stripes or bars on your shoulder. They doing it, they getting it because they've created that value for themselves to think and act differently. We're getting towards the end of what these particular pieces are. Follow-up. Never assume that because you confronted an issue immediately when it happened, that whatever action you took is good enough for it to be resolved. Follow-up, and one of the next things we're going to talk about, monitoring. I'm going to sort of group these two. They are very similar, but they're distinctly different. So you want to say, so I'm going to follow up this situation by, it could be a plethora of things. I'm going to, check in, let's assume the worst. Let's assume that the guy just aggravated the police officer. The police officer was stressed out, and he took more physical force, used more physical force than he was authorized to should have in that circumstance, right? So with that, let's say the officer has to go for retraining, needs psychological assistance, needs to, get counseling, needs more training, whatever it is, all right? A follow-up is to make sure that you're going to go and check that those things, that you're going to go see the officer. How you doing? Check in with them. You're going to follow up with your other platoon members to see how that's going. You're going to follow up with PIB to learn what they're finding out, to see if there's things you can apply to your platoon or your command to be able to make a difference in those areas. Monitoring is that you're actually taking actions to reassure that appropriate behaviors are occurring. Meaning, I'm gonna go to a lot of calls. I want to monitor this officer's behavior. And not only am I going to, call up people that I can't be on calls with to see how they were treated by the officer, but I'm going to make it a point whenever I'm available. I'm going to assist. I'm going to shadow this police officer on the calls that he or she goes on to. I'm going to make sure that they're handling the calls appropriately as they're where they're not. If they're not, I'm going to interject. I'm going to train. I'm going to encourage in a positive way the best I can. I will not allow that officer to act inappropriately in any circumstance. However, if there's an opportunity to help that officer improve, I'm going to see how he or she is doing with the enhanced training, with the and I'm going to make this, I'm making these up, with the counseling he or she received, etc. You see the difference? Follow-up is when you're going to talk about, somebody is always late for roll call. I'm just going to give you an example. If somebody's always late for roll call, you're going to say, and I'm going to follow this up by, and every Friday, immediately after a roll call, I want 5 minutes with the officer to talk about how well he or she's been doing, about getting the roll call on time, prepared, taking notes, got uniform on, inside of all authorized gear. You get the idea? Monitoring is, I'm going to go watch and make sure that the appropriate behaviors are now occurring because of my intervention. The last piece, and we talked a little bit about it, is related. How can this be related? It's possible before a video scenario starts in a tactical circumstance that you may have gotten a smaller in basket, and we're going to talk about the different methods that you could be given by civil service, but you could get a small in basket, and in it there's 2 or 3 pieces of paper, and one of them says, Officer Jones, or we'll say for this scenario, is asking for, has been calling in sick a lot, and your supervisor wants you to know why Officer Jones has been calling in sick, right? You may want to point out, and in this, I want to point out that what may be related to this, in my in-basket, I got a memorandum that pointed out that Officer Jones has been calling in sick a lot. Why is he sick? Is he truly sick? Is he trying to deal with a family issue? Is there an alcohol abuse issue? Is he working too many hours, working too many details? Does he or she have a second job? I want you to recognize that there's other things that are related to this that I'm going to pull into my investigation, to my resolution, whatever it may be. We've gone over these fairly rapidly today, but this is going to give you an idea of how you can, a method that you can use to resolve or to confront these scenarios. Not only these scenarios, but real life issues that you're going to face when you get to that next level of supervision, whether it's from officer to sergeant, from sergeant to lieutenant, or you go from lieutenant to commander, whatever it may be, you need that method. What I can tell you one more time, and it's not the only method, but it is a method that has helped modestly, hundreds of people successfully pass and at a high level the assessment center process. I'm confident that if you're comfortable with it and we train together and you're disciplined and you follow this process, just this little quick half-hour video isn't going to get it for you. This is an introduction to try to help you all understand what we're going to be talking about. I'd strongly encourage you to attend the Followup FOP training classes in person, where we're going to deep dive into these for hours at a time, to use real-life scenarios. We may even say scenarios that by coincidence look very closely to what you're tested on. There's only a small window of things that you can be tested on. Think about it. You're police officers. They can't ask you, how do you perform brain surgery? They can't ask you, how do you design a substation for the electric company? They're going to talk to you about law enforcement related issues. It's going to be a tactical issue. It's going to be an administrative challenge you get from a superior, or it's going to be a personnel problem that you have to deal with. When I say tactical, it could be a crime trend issue. It could be an ongoing, unfolding, a chase, a pursuit, a robbery in progress, hostage. It could be an administrative problem, issue. The captain needs a plan for a festival that's going to occur, and he needs you to do planning or something along that line. Or it could simply be you have an officer who's not acting appropriately, not showing up on time, calling in sick a bunch, or whatever it may be. What I am telling you is what we're going to arm you with is a process, is a method that's going to allow you to answer. And if you follow this, we can just about guarantee you're going to get the best score you can get by giving the answers that you prepared for and trained for. Don't forget, this is all about you being able to demonstrate the value that you've created for yourself, what makes the city of New Orleans need and want to pay you more and give you more authority and responsibility by promoting you. Thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing all of you in person, and have a good day.